Last time we left off, the building was, I'd say, a third done. I want to show you tonight at what point really are at, and it's pretty remarkable how much more we've done. I'd say the entire structure of the older part of the building is pretty much done. The initial building was done in 1931, and Gregorian architecture is really beautiful structure. All we did in essence was do all the brickwork. We did some of the architecture around there. We did some of the beautiful landscaping. But tonight we're going to concentrate, in the next few episodes, we're going to concentrate on a new part of the building. And it's all that's left. It's going to be interesting because it just serves to enhance the existing building. Should be fun. So here we go. Now, tonight, we're actually going to work on the roofing of the new building. I, for the most part, have all the landscaping done in the background. But tonight, we're going to work on the roofing. I have photographs that I took of the building myself. And again, we're going to try to make sure that we do not make the roofing any less small than the existing roof. So here we go. You might notice me doing that with my rapidograph. Every now and then you have to make sure the ink flow goes to the cartridge. You probably remember these pens. They're very much like the old fountain pens. You have to make sure the ink flow is always coming out. These rapidographs really have the same structure as the old traditional fountain pens. You always have to make sure the feed is constant. If the feed at any point is interrupted, you don't have a flow of ink, and that could be a disaster when you're drawing. Now the trick really is going to be to make sure each one of these comes out even. If there's any irregularity in the amount of space between each inking, it's going to be dramatic. It's going to look sluggish and awkward. And it's going to be sad because it could ruin the entire effect. And even a simple thing as architecture, all you need is one little area that's inconsistent, and the entire drawing is going to look irregular. It's going to look sloppy. I have to pray that the ink does not clog on me, that it doesn't become irregular. There's so many things that could happen that could ruin the entire effect. And if you notice, I'm not measuring any of it. I'm simply eyeballing it. And I think a lot of people are surprised. They think that I measure each one of these, or that it's a computer thing. Notice I don't measure. Notice there's no computer involved. It's simply the human hand at work. And you have to pray that everything just flows. The real trick in all this is making sure that it's all eyeballed correctly. And you really don't need to do more than that. Of course, the other problem is if any time that there's a droppage of ink, like a drop of ink that gets smudges, that could be a mess. And it's basically all luck, for that matter. So you notice I'm putting each piece of roofing in a horizontal method. Each one goes on top of each other. For the most part, I'm not measuring it. I'm simply winging it. Hopefully, it's going to be pretty accurate. I don't think there's a need to measure each one and go to that length. The hard part is going to be actually making sure each one of the grids that I put in, again, stays consistent. So far, so good. I think that for the most part, the work I've done on the existing building, the building that was built in 1931, that was pretty much the essence of the entire structure. The new structure, though it is incredible, to me it's just an enhancement. The old building is still just glorious. It's just beautiful. And in a way, if you notice it, the new part is actually put to the rear of the old. I think even the builders realized what truly is remarkable. Even though the new part is bigger in size and in scope, it really, to me, the elder building, the one that was built in 1931, is just incredible. It's not remarkable. It's not like an incredible feat of architecture. It's just beautiful. If anything, it's quite simple. It's just very attractive to look at. It stands out. When you drive by on the street and take a glance, it just stands out so much from the rest of the buildings on that street. I find it to be a beautiful structure. We do have a pretty beautiful street. When you drive by that part of town, it just stands out so much. Now, if you notice, for the most part, they all look pretty much, each slat of the roof, each individual piece uniformly fits. I didn't measure. I didn't use a ruler to determine the amount of space each one's going to occupy. I simply let the ruler do the work in my left hand. Now, when I get to the next sector, it's going to be tricky because you're going to have to be equal to these. So I'm going to go into that and measure from the existing ones. I'll show you how that's done. There's only one left. Let's make sure I evenly space it. Very good. What I'm going to do is take my ruler. It's already dry, believe it or not. A lot of people be worried that, oh my God, he's going to mess it up. Not going to happen. I'm going to use my rulers to measure existing lines and make sure that they're concurrent to the new ones. And that's all there is to it. Same thing. As I go down, I'm not going to measure. I'm simply going to look at the existing rules and make sure they're concurrent. I'm going to do the same thing with rules that go on the other side of the roof. Same thing. Here we go again. Looks pretty good. We're going to do the same thing with the bricking. That's one thing that's interesting about the roofing and the bricking. Basically the same amount of structure between each two. And you'd think it'd be a drastically different amount of spacing, but it's not. I actually cheated. I did the outline of the building separately. I thought it'd be kind of boring, quite honestly. And it was really a waste of great time, but I did it. ahead of time just to make sure. It'd be kind of a boring amount of work, and I don't think you'd really appreciate the amount of time that went into it. It'd be much more fun to see the building come to life with the bricking, with the roofing. You actually see the building come to life that way. Okay. I remember I kind of did the roofing on the existing building about 4 episodes ago. I think the real part that's going to be fun is when I get all the environmental work done, and that means the trees, the shading. I think I'm going to go into each one of these separately now. You notice how I hold my triangle? I actually have it like this, and it's a good way to hold it because your hand, it becomes part of your hand. I like to have my thumb underneath and my fingers on top of it. It becomes, again, part of my hand. And I could pretty much move it accordingly. My hand's going to be dictated by my eyes, and I'm going to move it accordingly. I tried teaching students to do that. That's one of the hardest things for them to grasp mentally. But once you learn how to do it, once it becomes part of your hand, that's 99% of the battle. And I'm telling you, you will not see this technique taught in a book. This is something I really developed myself. And one more, and we have an entire section of the roof done. We're going to go to the next section, same thing. I don't have to measure this. I guarantee you, it'll be the same amount of space between each one. It has to be. I could use the other pen. It's a different brand, and the ink comes out a little bit thicker, even though the same size pen. Different manufacturers make different levels, disperse different levels of ink, even though they're the same size. And you'll find that with any manufacturer. One of these is American-made, one is German. I'm not going to say which one's better. I am going to say this. You'll see the difference dramatically in the amount of ink one dispenses. Even though it's nominal, it's not a great deal of a difference. I could pretty much use each one differently. Doesn't matter. I'll say one thing, and I'm not going to get into names. One of them doesn't leak as much as the other. I'm sure if you use this enough, you'll be able to tell me which one it is. There we go. Now, I could do two things. I could actually show you the bricking now. Maybe I will. The bricking on the new facade is different than the bricking on the Gregorian. The Gregorian was pretty much free-spirited. Didn't have to go through the same nonsense. It was actually more beautiful. Definitely something one can appreciate visually. The new one, even though it's nice, beautiful, it is very unimaginative, but again, in its own sense. I'm going to actually use the different pen. Again, this one disperses ink a little bit thicker. I'm going to use my catch pen pad to make sure too much ink doesn't come out. And you can probably see it with your own eye how there's a different amount of ink coming out. Even though it's the same size pen, it's a .20, but just a little bit more ink comes out. Now, you'd probably say to yourself, my God, it's hardly enough to make a difference. It probably isn't. But I notice it. And I would rather use this at this point for this purpose. Now, again, you're going to see this and you're going to say the bricking seems to be the same amount of space. as the roofing. It probably is. But we're going to do the lines differently. And you'll see that the roofing is going to be at a different angle. The actual bricking is going to be pretty much vertical. And again, it's going to be pretty boring. But the end result is what's going to be dramatic. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be interesting. There's some sculpture in front of the library, which is interesting. These two little areas that were done, they're little sculptures of letters. And I could not actually do them justice. They're at such a distance, and they've rusted a great deal. So they're very dark. But I'll do the best I can to show some sort of imagery. Now, the key too is some of this, the bottom, the facade of this building is lighter than the rest. What I'm going to do is pretty much show the amount of space there is. And I'm just not going to put a horizontal area to each one. I'm going to stop off there. We're going to go into this area with more horizontal lines. We're also going to, in the bricking that's involved, I used a lot of stipple to show that it's red and discolored. I'm not going to do that yet. The windows in the door, there's 3 separate windows in each one of the doors. I made sure because I drove by just this evening, took a final look to make sure there's 3 separate doors. Again, when we put the bricking underneath this area, we're going to darken it up with a lot more stipple. We could, if we so choose, actually put cross hatch. I don't know if I want to. I just might go with stipple. Okay, we're going pretty good here. The fun part is when you actually do stuff like grass, all these little things to make everything pop out. Yeah, you could already tell how this pops out, how much it pops out, how dramatic it is just by putting in the horizontal. It's really amazing. Just one set of lines, the horizontal, and already there's a weight in the building. It seems to be incredible. Again, I'm going to finish up by putting the horizontal for this side. These are all brickings. It's going to be different to see the bricking from the roof, but you'll see a dramatic difference because we're not going to put stipple in it. I think what I want to do too is actually the big drama is going to be when I darken up the windows. I think the big difference between the roof and the facade of the outside, the bricking, is the fact that the bricking is darker. So I'm not going to put as much stipple in that. I just find it amazing that this simple horizontal lines have added so much weight to the entire structure. I don't know, if you remember from the beginning of our program, we had nothing but the outside lines done. Now that the lines are in, the entire building has weight. I find that to be amazing. I think what I want to do in the next program is actually darken each one of these windows as soon as the bricking is announced. Anyway, I think I'll show you, and you can see for yourself the amount of impact that just the bricking alone, the horizontal aspect, does. We're going to make a really concise difference. Once all this bricking is stipulized, you'll see a dramatic difference. You can actually tell the red brick had a big difference compared to the roof, which is kind of light gray. The other part is too the white area around the windows. The eaves are really going to be dramatic because they're not at all altered. I think the entire structure is going to be full then. Like I said, we're going to go into the windows next, darken them up. That's going to be another presence. Right now, today, all we really concentrated on was the horizontal. All right, let's do this to make sure. All right. It's amazing how much difference just the horizontal has made. I like the fact that it's kind of dramatic to see how much impact just the horizontal lines make in any structure. I think in the Western world, we are based on a society that we see more of the horizontal than anything else when we look at architecture. It's also very important now to make sure each one of these areas is very even. We're getting close to the bottom of each structure, and if it's off by even a marginal amount, it's going to be so obvious. Good. Okay, there's that. There's not there. All right. Basically, we just have this one part of the structure to put horizontal line in. I could actually just do the foliage, the outline of the foliage at this point. And that's what I'm going to do right now. The foliage we're putting in right now is the very bottom of each one of these structures. It really doesn't have much impact visually, but if we get it wrong, it could have a little impact. Light only hits the top of these. And that's dramatic in its own sense. Okay. It's interesting, this building, the basement of this building is only visual in a few places, so we have to be very careful. If I don't put it in, it's going to be noticeable if you walk up to it. But for the most part, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. All right, so we're going to keep on doing the vertical bricking as we go out to the end of our program. Next program, we're going to actually work more on the windows, and we could actually work on some of the vertical aspects. I kind of like the way it's happening. To me, it's just amazing how much impact the horizontal has on the entire structure. And like I said before, our Western civilization, 99% of everything that's built really has a slant that's very much inclined towards buildings that the horizontal aspect. You don't believe me? Just look at all the things that are built. There's 99% of it is built in a horizontal method, in a manner that really catches our attention. We're consumed by the fact that any building that's built very tall is quite the unusual. The vertical is not the thing that amazes us.